My name's Roy, and I'm 25 years old. Since I moved out on my own, I've been very cautious. I lock all the doors, close all the windows, and make sure I have all the police and emergency numbers handy. People call me paranoid, but not everyone knows how dangerous it can be to give someone a chance to enter your home, because you don't know who you might meet. I learned this lesson the hard way 15 years ago. And every time I question whether I'm being too exaggerated, I remember what happened that night and realize that a little extra security never hurts. I was only 10 years old, and it was my first night alone. My parents were divorced, and my dad wasn't a big fan of babysitters, as he didn't trust inviting a stranger into your home to watch your child. I usually lived with my mother, but she had to go on a business trip. And although my father spent every weekend with me, on weekdays, I didn't know anything about his life. My mother forced my dad to take care of me for that week, and my dad told her that he was taking a vacation to be with me, but he lied. He had already taken a leave a month ago to go to another country with his new girlfriend, and even though he didn't tell me, I saw his messages with her, and I knew it was true. Without the vacation, my dad got engaged to my mom, and when he talked to me, he told me that he had to work and that I could take care of myself. I was already old, and he knew that I was very responsible. He promised me not to say anything to my mom, and I agreed. I wanted to be alone too. It was my chance to prove to the world that I could take care of myself. When he left for work, my dad locked all the doors and left me the keys. He also left me all the emergency numbers close by, with his on top of everything if anything should happen. He also left me prepared food that I only had to reheat, and lots of treats to eat only after dinner. He told me that to make sure I did everything, there were cameras all over the house and that he would watch me at all times. But I knew that was a lie. Otherwise, he would have told me before or shown them to me. After all this, my father grabbed all the stuff and left, leaving me alone in his apartment. The moment he left, I was running to open the candy and stuffed all of it in my mouth without a second thought. I knew that after dinner, I would want to eat more, so I saved a few for later and went to watch TV. After a few minutes, I fell asleep with my belly full of treats and the TV on. I was dreaming about my pets at my mom's house until suddenly, a loud noise woke me up. The doorbell was ringing incessantly, as if someone who knew the place wasn't empty had been ringing for a while. I was terrified that I hadn't slept all day, and the doorbell ringer was my angry dad. But when I saw the time, I realized that it would still be a long time before he arrived. I put on my flip-flops and approached the door. On the other side was a woman. She looked familiar, but I couldn't try to remember who she was. I asked her what she wanted, and she told me she was the neighbor my dad sent to take care of me. I told her that my dad had left me alone, but she said he changed his mind on the way downstairs and sent her to make sure everything was okay for a few minutes. I wasn't sure if I believed her, but within seconds she said, "Come on, open up, Roy, or your dad'll get mad." This woman looked very familiar. She knew my father was working and knew my name, so I believed her and opened up. As she walked in, she thanked me with a strange smile and started asking me if I had done my homework, to which I replied surprisingly that I was on vacation since it was the middle of January. She just laughed, ignored me, and told me to watch TV and hurried into my father's room. I saw out of the corner of my eye what she was doing, and she was rummaging through everything as if she was looking for something. I asked what she was doing, and she told me that my father had told her to get his money from him and to give it to her because she wanted to buy a surprise for his favorite son. At that moment, I didn't notice how strange it was that my father didn't know where his own money was, and I just got excited about the surprise I was going to get. After a few minutes, the girl violently broke the drawer of a closed cabinet and took out a pile of money, to which she reacted by laughing frantically. She stuffed everything into a bag and was leaving, but I stopped her and asked her to warm up my food before she left. At first, she just looked at me angrily, but then she gave me a big smile and said she'd be happy to warm up my food. Suddenly, she rushed over to me and hugged and squeezed me violently. I started to cry in desperation, but she paid no attention, just pulled me over to the kitchen chair and told me to stay still or she would hurt me. Terrified, I obeyed. The girl tied me to the chair with a rope she had found while going through my father's things and started boiling water. She would probably make me the noodles my dad had on top of the fridge. I told her I wasn't hungry anymore, but she ignored me. After a few minutes, she asked if I was thirsty and wanted some water, to which I told her I'd prefer some orange juice. I asked her if she could untie me since the ropes were tight, and again, she did not answer me. I wanted to ask her if she would serve me juice, but my thoughts were interrupted by an indescribable sensation of pain. The girl was pouring all the hot boiling water slowly on my head. She was dripping it slowly, and the water was running all over my face and body. I screamed desperately and tried to free myself, but there was no solution. I felt my face starting to melt and my vision beginning to blur. The girl started to run the hot water all over the rest of my body, ensuring that none of my parts were dry, while she laughed nonstop. When she ran out of the water, I was still screaming, to which she reacted by slapping me hard across the face as she continued to laugh. Almost without understanding anything, I heard banging on the door and voices asking me if everything was all right. The woman went to open the door and worriedly told the neighbors that I had an accident and needed help. As the neighbors came in to see me, she ran out of the house in desperation, taking all my father's money with her. The neighbors who came to help me saw me and screamed in surprise when they saw my condition, and they untied me and desperately called the ambulance. I was never able to recover from what happened. I received permanent wounds and marks all over my body and could not leave the hospital for a long time. Eventually, I found out that that woman was my dad's ex-girlfriend, with whom he had gone on a vacation a month before, but they had a very violent fight. The girl looked familiar to me because some of the pictures I saw of her when I was checking my father's cell phone. And I also remembered how I had seen them arguing loudly in chat rooms, and she constantly threatened to hurt me, but my father never took her seriously. After the hospital, I didn't see my father for years, not because he didn't want to see me, but because my mother denied him until I was of age and could decide independently. My father didn't try to take any legal action against her, as he felt very guilty about what happened and felt that maybe he deserved it. Today, my relationship with him has improved a little, but I never go into his apartment again because every time I see him from a distance, the marks that are permanently left on my skin start to burn again.
Being home alone is a solitude that isn't for everyone. But those of us who enjoy it never turn the opportunity down. But this one night has made me so I never want the house to myself again. Mac and I have been married for 3 years. His job sends him out of town for a week every other month, and I get some time to do me. Mac enjoys traveling, and I like being home. It's a win-win. As we approached the summer months, Mac had some extra work piled on his plate, and it turned out he was going to be out of town for the whole summer. I love my alone time, but an entire summer was going to be too long, and I dreaded it. Mac surprised me with the German Shepherd dog so I wouldn't be so lonely, and I was overjoyed. I named her Willow. He also gifted me with 3 bottles of wine. They weren't any brands I'd heard of, and he told me they were imported from India. He told me that there were to be a countdown until he came home. The dreaded day came, and I reluctantly pulled up to the airport. I'm gonna miss you so much. I'll miss you too, love. Are you gonna be okay? I'll be just fine. Besides, Willow is gonna be excellent company. I just hope she doesn't steal my side of the bed. I gave Mac a kiss and watched him disappear into the crowd to catch his flight. I went home and took Willow for a walk before I went to run errands. That evening when I came home, I took her for another walk and settled in for the night. For the first month, all was well, and I had happily started on the second bottle of wine. One night while watching TV and enjoying my nightly glass of wine, the power cut out. There wasn't a storm nor any construction going on. I took a flashlight and Willow with me to the basement to check the breaker. Nothing was wrong with it, but it wasn't turning the power back on. Suddenly, Willow's fur on her back stood straight up as she fixated her gaze on the corner in the basement. She began to growl ferociously at it. Willow? What is it, girl? I shone the flashlight to the corner, and there stood a man in all black with a mask on. His eyes were wide beneath the mask, and I could see the sinister smile on his face. I dropped the flashlight in shock and horror. Willow stood protectively in front of me, and the man looked at me and dragged his thumb across his throat in a threatening manner. He lunged at me, and Willow tackled him, easily overpowering him. I screamed and ran to get my phone, but then when I got upstairs, Willow was on the couch watching the TV and the power was back on. I jerked myself awake in a cold sweat. Willow licked my face. She must have sensed I had a bad dream. I patted her back and took her outside for a final constitutional before going to bed for the night. I called Mac and he assured me I just had a bad dream and to get some proper rest. The next night, I had fallen asleep after drinking my glass of wine. Maybe this one was stronger than the other? But I woke up to Willow in my face growling like she did in my nightmare. The hair on the back of her neck stood up and I screamed as she went to bite my face off. I shoved her off and stood up, opening my eyes. I was now awake for real. I looked at Willow sleeping peacefully next to me. What was up with these nightmares? I called Mac and asked him about the wine. Hey, darling, how are you? I'm good, missing you like crazy. I miss you too. You know how I had a nightmare the other night? Yeah, I had another one, and I've noticed it happened after I started drinking that bottle of wine. You don't think it's the wine, do you? Of course not, my love. Maybe you're just feeling some cabin fever. Have you been going out? I've been taking Willow on walks twice a day and I go out and about. How could I have cabin fever? If you think it's the wine, maybe you shouldn't drink it anymore. But how will you count down the weeks until I'm home if you stop? You're right. I want to count down the weeks. Maybe I'm just stressed from missing you. That's my girl. I have to go. I'll talk to you later. Love you. Love you. Another night after drinking the wine, a man stood over my bed and began strangling me. Willow was decapitated next to me. I woke up on the floor soaked in sweat and Willow whimpering at me, worried about me. For the next month, these nightmares continued and I felt as though I was losing touch with reality. One night, I went to pour myself and Willow sniffed at the bottle. She knocked it out of my hand after sniffing it and it shattered all over the floor. I scolded her, but she wouldn't let me near the mess to clean it. No matter which direction I went, Willow wouldn't let me near it. I decided to leave it alone and call a friend over to see if I'm going crazy. I had suspected the wine, and since she worked at a winery downtown, I figured she would know if something was off. I told her about the nightmares I've been having, and she took a look at the wine mess that was starting to dry and bent over to get a good smell of it. She told me I needed to call the police. It turned out that Mac had been cheating on me and his summer away at work was just a getaway with his mistress. He didn't have the guts to tell me he wanted a divorce, so he thought if he could get some customized wine and give it to me as a countdown, I could drink it. There was a drug in the last 2 bottles that were intended to strip my sanity away slowly and put me in a hospital. Willow was a smart dog and saw that I wasn't myself, and she must have suspected the wine too. Good girl, Willow.
Hello there. I'm Max. I'm 23 years old and I'm a construction worker. I found many memories of mine to be quite disturbing, but none led me to the current situation that I'm in. The abilities I have are beyond the capabilities of the human mind. Some appreciate it, while others don't understand. Most of you may not believe in ghosts, but as a person who's encountered some of them, I can tell you that there can be no doubt about their existence. They are real. There's nothing I can do to convince you, but to tell my story, as they can't be caught on camera or recorded in any kind of way. You can at least be sure of the fact that any recording that you see of these creatures are fake, but not all the stories that you've heard are. This is what I refer to as my curse, the ability to communicate with beings that are not supposed to be in this world. I'm merely the victim of this curse. To make you realize that, I want to tell you what happened to me 5 weeks ago. As a person who lost his parents at a young age, I'm used to living alone. I lived with my aunt and her alcoholic husband in my teen years. When I turned 18, they kicked me out of the house. In order to survive, I started to work in any kind of job I could find and ended up being a construction worker. The day when it all started was one of those days when I'd come home from work really tired from all the work I've done throughout the day. I laid on my couch and turned on the TV. As I was watching the movie called Home Alone, I heard the rattling sound of the dishes coming from the kitchen. At first, I thought it was my imagination playing tricks on me, but then I heard the sound of footsteps. My survival instincts kicked in until I realized that the sound might have been coming from the movie I was watching. I turned off the TV and started to listen for any kind of sound. In the couple of seconds of sitting in complete darkness, everything was quiet, but when I was about to turn the TV on again, I heard the noise of my kitchen window closing. At that point, I remember thinking that it was either a home intruder or something that I could only explain as a supernatural being. Considering that I have encountered ghosts before, I was keeping a cross with a sharp edge in the living room. My friends always thought it was a decorative item, but it was actually for protection. Still not being sure what I would face, I walked to my kitchen and opened the door very slowly. As I opened it, I saw nothing. The kitchen was empty. At that moment, I heard the TV was turned on again. I rushed back to the living room, only to find nothing but a turned-on TV. As I approached the TV, I heard a whisper coming from behind me. An unearthly voice was whispering my name. The channels on the TV started to change rapidly for a moment, and it stopped at a channel that was bizarre. I could see a living room that uncannily resembled my own. I could see myself leaning towards the TV. As I observed the screen, I noticed a humanoid figure hiding in the shadows. He continued to whisper my name and telling me to stop. I cautiously turned and looked inside the shadows. There, I could see a female, transparent figure. It looked like my mother. "Is that you, Mother?" I asked quietly. The ghost took a few steps towards me. I could see the scars its body carried. There were worms slithering around its body, feasting on this poor creature. It had empty eye sockets. The creature had no nose, but the open flesh revealed a bone structure. The ghost looked at me and started to smile. As its grin became wider, it started to open its mouth. The mouth of this abomination opened until it ripped the cheeks, and I could see countless amounts of teeth spiraling inside the mouth. I then understood that this being was not my mother, but only an imposter. I took my cross and jammed it inside its transparent torso. It made a diabolical shrieking sound as I stabbed it, which only gave me the courage to continue. I struck the spirit over and over again until it fell to the ground. I thought it was over, as the body of the ghost turned into infinite particles and vanished. But I was wrong. As I destroyed the creature, I felt goosebumps on the back of my neck. Just when I was about to turn around, I felt two giant arms grabbing me. I tried to free myself from the grip and managed to do so by stabbing my cross to the other creature's arm. As it screamed in pain, I turned around and saw another soul. Its face was unrecognizable. Pieces of flesh were dripping from the face like it was liquefied. Its body had burn marks. Its hands were cut off. It tried to speak. The only sound I could hear was, "Why?" Its sound reminded me of my father. This creature too had the intention to deceive me into believing that they were my dead parents' souls, but I was smart enough to see through their foolish attempt. With the adrenaline rushing through my body, I jumped on the trickster ghost and stabbed it, grunted and called for mercy as I struck the final blow. Its disgusting body dissolved into thin air like the previous creature. After that incident, I started to act paranoid. I couldn't sleep for a couple days. I was afraid that more would come, so I realized that I had to protect the house from the unworldly beings. I burned and placed a dozen of incenses around the place and made sure they were lit every day. Everything seemed to be fine for 3 days. I did not witness any paranormal activities, but after 3 days, a strange thing happened. I heard a knocking at my door. I looked through the peephole and saw it was my crazy neighbor who was knocking. Her hair was a mess of white and grayness. Her clothes were ripped. She smelled like rotten fish and sounded like a screeching of car tires. She was a person who always acted a little weird and would always complain about something that I didn't do. I opened the door and she started to complain about the smell that was coming from my flat. She looked inside my place as I completely opened the door. Before I even had the chance to explain that the incenses were the source of the smell, she gasped and started to run back in a hurry. It was a strange behavior, but I was used to her lunacy. After an hour, I heard my door knocked again. This time I opened it and saw 2 policemen waiting. As I opened the door, they started to tell me that they received a complaint from a neighbor. I knew that she was crazy, but I didn't assume that she would actually go and call the cops on me. As I calmly tried to explain how everything was a misunderstanding, they peeped inside my flat and saw something that I was not aware of. After seeing it, they burst into my place. They ordered me to lay down and handcuffed me for no reason at all. They brought me to the police and spoke with insane accusations. They said that I had killed my parents. They even said that I tried to dissolve my father's body in acid. At that moment, I understood that the 2 creatures were not destroyed. My cross was not enough to demolish them, and now they were seeking revenge. They plotted a great scheme against me. As shape-shifting spirits, they were able to reveal themselves to the people they chose in any shape, and they decided to reveal themselves as my parents. They made it look like I murdered them. They were not able to trick me, so they decided to trick the others and make me look like an insane person. Unfortunately, they succeeded. Now that you know my story, I need your help. I'm the real victim in this story, but no one will believe me. They put me in this dreadful facility with lunatics. I'm not afraid of these people, but I am afraid of the ghosts that continue to exist in this asylum. There are many people who were murdered here. Many souls who are still lurking around, trying to find means of revenge. You must believe me. I'm not insane. I was alone in my house that day. My parents died when I was a child. I didn't kill them. I killed the ghosts. At least that's what I thought back then. Please, let me escape this hellish nightmare. I was at home, alone.